right, Andy, thanks for jumping on today, brother.
You bet, man. Absolutely. Happy to be here.
The flip-flop guy.
Yeah.
I will be honest with you. The first time that I saw your stuff on Instagram, and I actually heard Bert Soren talking about you, and he was talking about the flip-flop guy, and I thought it had something to do with what you're wearing on your feet.
Everybody usually does.
How long does it take people to figure out that it has to do with cooking?
That's a funny question. Once I show people what I do, then they understand it. But if I'm just talking to them and I tell them I'm the flip flop guy and I cook meat, they usually are like, "Oh, okay, so you just cook in flip flops everywhere you go."
They immediately look down at your shoes to see if you're wearing them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they do.
Why don't, for people who don't know what the flip flop method is, why don't you give a quick intro to that? Because I found it fascinating the way that you cook wild game and what you do with it.
Yeah. So the flip flop method is you take the entire hindquarter of a deer leg, a sheep leg, any ungulate, anything that doesn't carry trigonosis, and you're essentially flash searing it. So what you'll do is you'll mop our family recipe sauce on the top with a rosemary mop. Me and my dad concocted a device that we call the flip flop mop. So you can just put rosemary sprigs in that mop.
And so what is a mop like? What does that consist of? What does that look like?
I wonder, do I have one that's close?
You might.
I might.
You're a well-prepared chef. So I was reading about it, and that's actually one of the questions as I was reading on your website. I was sitting there looking, and I was reading about the rosemary mop, and I was trying to figure out, like, okay, what does that actually look like? Because I figured mop just means, I know there's a sauce that you've got and a mixture that you kind of put together that's proprietary, and then you're going to put it on much like if you would base something, but a mop sounded different to me. So
yeah, so this is a flip flop mop. You put your rosemary sprigs in.
Oh, you put sprigs right inside of it. Okay.
Yeah, and then you can cinch it, and then you have a basting brush, right?
And so what are the sprigs like? Why not just use a brush? Why use the rosemary sprigs?
Well, you actually get a lot of the rosemary flavor into the sauce and onto the meat while you're using it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so you mop it.
I'd rather use herbs than, synthetic or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Fresher. Better.
And so what are you mopping onto the hindquarter as you're preparing it?
So I mop on our private reserve sauce. And then once I'm done mopping it, I salt and pepper the top of the leg.
Okay.
And then I'll flip the whole leg over. Now the underside I've already done that with. So the underside's ready to go. And cook time is about a minute, right? So
what's are you putting this over, like, are you cooking this over an open grill, or what are you putting this on?
So I'm cooking it over a Weber. I usually load it up with charcoal. So there's only about a half inch between the grate and the charcoal.
Okay.
So you're getting the highest heat that you can.
Are you looking at it? Do you have a temperature gauge that you're putting on it that you're trying to get it to? Or
no? So I've checked temps. Usually I'm using the grill right around 1,000 to 1,100 degree heat, and I can only get that high a heat with briquettes. I've never been able to do it with hardwoods or any
gas or anything like
charcoal. Gas, it's not even possible.
Not even possible.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to use charcoal briquettes to get it that hot.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And then, you flip the leg over and you just start slicing off little thin 1/4 inch thick steaks that are 3 to 6 inch long steaks. And you feed everybody off the knife. Once you're done with that, you have a whole new raw leg because you're just doing it seared and rare, right? Reapply the sauce, salt and pepper it, flip the leg back over, and then start going again.
Okay. So you're basically, as you flip it over, you're cutting, did you say 1/4 inch?
Yeah, 1/4 inch thick steaks.
Okay, 1/4 inch. So you're cutting those 1/4 inch thick steaks. You're getting all the seared meat off of one side of the leg. You rebaste it, flip it over, sear that side of the leg, and then you start cutting off the side of the leg that you just flipped over.
Yep.
How many flips do you usually get on a hindquarter?
It depends on size and weight.
I gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, a 10-pound leg, you're going to feed maybe 8 to 15 people. um, 20 if you stretch it out. 15-pound leg, you're going to do comfortably 30 people to 40 people. A 20-pound leg, you're going to do probably 40 to 60, depending.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And are you cooking like is this work with pretty much any wild game, any ungulate? Like is there stuff that's like, hey, this just doesn't like taste that great on certain there's this kind of like across the board, this is money.
Across the board, it's the best way that anyone that I've ever prepared any of their wild game has said that it's like you can't beat it.
And does this completely get rid of, I know people who eat game a lot, like the gaminess thing just kind of goes away. They don't even taste it. But for in my house,
Yeah.
I'll eat it, but I don't know if it's my wife's palate or whatever. But she grew up, her dad hunted her whole life. She just does not like wild game. Even if I don't think it tastes gamey at all, she still thinks it's gamey. Does this get rid of any of that, or do you still have people who kind of have that weird palate still think there's some gamey taste to it?
So, I mean, there's a slight gamey taste to it, but for the most part, and I've fed tens of thousands of people all around the United States for almost 2 decades now doing this. And every single person, every hunter's wife that's tried it has absolutely loved it, even though they hate eating the game that their husband prepares.
So the husband has to figure out how to cook with the flip flop method. Are you gonna be cooking at Winter Strong?
Yeah, I'll probably cook on Saturday at Winter Strong this year.
All right, I got to make sure that I bring my wife over that day so that I
Yeah.
can like get her to eat it, and then she'll be like, "Yeah, I'll eat this," and then I'll
Yeah.
know. So does it have to be a whole leg? Like, can you still use this on stuff that's already gone to the processor, on steaks and that kind of stuff?
Oh
Does it
yeah. I
still?
mean, so with the sauce, right? Every bottle of sauce is intended to be doubled with red wine.
I saw that.
So one of the benefits is like I'll run skewers through back straps
Mm-hmm.
and I'll throw some French bread cut in half in a Traeger with some cheese on it.
Okay.
And then I'll load that up and have backstrap sandwich. Right? Because you can still do the shave technique with the backstrap if it's on a skewer and you're able to flip it. So
Okay, that makes sense. So you put it on the skewer, you shave it off, you rebaste it, you flip it, you keep doing the same thing back and forth on the
yeah,
skewer.
so that's on open fire. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to do like pan sear, you can there's many different ways. You can either, marinate it and then cook it in the sauce and like, if you're going to do quarter or half-inch medallions,
Mm-hmm.
you wait till the blood comes up from the top, flip the medallion and wait for the blood to come up from the top. And you can add a little bit of sauce after it's done cooking on it. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just salt and pepper my leg steaks and I'll cook them and then slice them up. And then I'll use the sauce as a dipping sauce and I'll just dip straight into it. Another good way to do it is like if I'm going to use my Traeger and throw a full back strap on or leg steaks or something like that, I'll just apply the sauce on every 10 minutes or so, cooking at a low heat like 225, and I'll just keep adding sauce, let that kind of caramelize, and then add sauce and then salt and pepper right at the end, and then you have a steak that's encased in sauce and comes out absolutely amazing.
Wow. So interesting. That when I read on your website too, when you do whether you do a hindquarter or anything, are you always shaving that off and putting that on like some kind of a buttered French bread or something like that? Like, is that part of what you think gives it that taste? Or
Growing up, that's how we always served it, was over buttered
Mhm.
sourdough.
Okay.
Um, Obviously in today's world, a lot of people are gluten free or, whatever, and they don't like bread. So it really depends on the crowd. But usually on like a 15 to 20 pound leg, I'll do 3 loaves of French bread, 3 loaves of like sourdough baguette. And I'll probably still end up with at least a half a loaf at the end where people didn't use the bread. Cause like usually people will do the bread for the first 2 or 3 slices.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, they're like, I don't want the bread. Just give me the meat.
Just give me the meat.
Yeah.
So you don't make it as a sandwich though. You just serve it open face,
Face.
basically.
Yeah.
And then they eat it with a fork, cut it up with a fork, or they just hold it and just eat it like a piece of pizza almost.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did this come from? I mean, what's the genesis story on this cooking method?
So my grandfather in 1958 in Marin County would work with a lot of Portuguese sheep farmers. He was the fish and game warden for the state of California for Marin and Sonoma County. And there was,
and you said, I think, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but he kind of jumped into that, right? Like coming back from, he served in World War II.
Yeah, he came off the boat from World War II. I think 2 or 3 years later, he was fishing game, and he did that.
What did he do in the military?
He was Navy on a ship.
Okay,
in the Pacific.
On a ship. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just kind of wanted to get a little backstory on him, so I knew, going into it. So he ends up being the fish and game commissioner, and he's dealing with a lot of these sheep farmers.
Yeah, he was fish and game warden, and so the Portuguese, they would just put legs on a spit, and they would just spin the leg of a lamb, and then just shave off meat as they were cooking. And he was like, "Man, I'm going to do this with a blacktail leg," but instead of putting it on a spit and doing it that way, he just put it straight on a grill and would sear it and flip it and shave it and sauce it and sear it and flip it and shave it the whole way. And so he started doing that in 1958. And between 1958 and 1998, when he died, you could say that whole cooking method within Marin and Sonoma County went absolutely viral. Every ranch, every hunter, every butcher shop, you could tell them, "Hey, I want flip-flops," and they would cut a flip-flop.
So how do they cut that? If you tell somebody you want it, they're basically just going to cut you the whole hind quarter, or are they cutting it a specific way?
Just cut right below the knee on the hind leg.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then they're going to cut up around all the way to the ball joint, and you're just going to take that full leg, and that's what you're going to use.
Okay. So as you're butchering your game, that's basically how you're going to prepare, like get that part prepared. Yeah. And then imagine what you're just going to remove the hide, remove the silver skin, and then everything else you're cooking from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'll do with a leg when I take it off, I'll hang it for 10 to 14 days. I'll wait until there gets to be a little bit of mold on it, and that skin gets nice and black and air dried.
You're hanging it at what temperature?
I'm in Montana, so anywhere between like 35 and below zero.
Okay. But it has to be like, what's the highest temperature you could hang it in? Because obviously not everyone gets to live out there.
If I was going to hang it, I wouldn't want to hang it any less than like 45 degrees.
Okay.
Or any more than 45 degrees.
Any more than 45.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're waiting for a little bit of mold to get on it.
Yeah.
And then
once that whole leg is dried out and encased, I'll take one of my knives and I'll just cut all that aged skin off and get down to the fresh meat, cut all that mold off and everything like that. And then I'll wrap it in saran wrap and I'll just put that in the freezer, and that usually stays pretty good the oldest leg I've ever cooked probably was 13 years old, sitting in the freezer, and it was fine.
And so when you hang it, you're not skinning it before you hang it, are you? Or are you?
Well, skin the animal, yeah, but I won't take all the silver skin off the meat.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So when people are, just talk a little bit about the grill type and that kind of thing. Because so for me, and I'm not any kind of a chef, I've got a propane grill, but it's dying on me. So I've actually been thinking about like, what should I go buy? What's, if you're going to cook the right way, what kind of grill, or if you need to do multiple things, what should somebody have?
Honestly, so for cooking legs, I literally will pretty much only use a Weber grill. They're
But it's got to be pretty big, right, to be
no,
able
no,
to.
no, no, no. You just get like
No,
regular Weber kettle that's 22 inches. Biggest leg I've ever cooked on a Weber kettle is a 65 pound elk leg. It fills up the whole grill.
really.
Yeah, it fills up
Okay,
the whole grill.
but you got the whole thing on there.
Yeah, but you get the whole thing on there and the whole thing's getting heat. Um,
Okay,
so if you're cooking legs and you want to cook open fire and you want it to be easy and cheap, a Weber kettle. Um, if I want to be fast, I'll use a gas grill, and I have a little Weber gas grill. And then I have a Traeger 850, which I would say I use 90% of the time when I'm cooking for myself or cooking for friends or doing any kind of dinner. If I don't need open fire. And that,
so you'll still use this method on the Traeger.
yeah. But I won't.
What does that use as its fuel?
Well,
Because I don't have one of those.
so a Traeger's just a smoker. So it
Okay,
has an auger. It loads in pellets, and they
it's
slow
burning
burn.
pellets.
So
Okay.
basically, you're cooking in a smoky oven.
Okay.
So that if I'm using my Traeger, this isn't like a hot, fast sear or anything like that. I'm usually cooking between like 200 and 250, and I'm slow cooking. If I'm doing a 1/2 inch thick ribeye, it's going to take me 35 minutes to bring it up to about 115, 120 when I'll pull it off. But I'll still use the sauce and everything like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But if it's a leg, you're only cooking that open fire on. If you're using
100%.
like cuts of meat or something like that, you can cook those in a Traeger or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Chicken
Okay.
and all that. Shrimp, lobster.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So from the standpoint of from the genesis of the way your grandfather kind of started initiating this method, it kind of started taking off in that area. How did that get handed down, like through the generations, and then how did it kind of what was its evolution in terms of, because I know that you've got a proprietary sauce now, and how did it become something that now where you're traveling all over the country cooking this way for large organizations, things like that? How did it get to that point?
So I can chalk that up to a lot of different things. So first, it was passed in the mid 90s from my grandfather to my dad. And my dad started doing it. My grandfather was, getting up there in age, and he was getting in his late 70s, 80s. And then in around 2006, 2007, my dad passed it off to me. And that was when I started doing it for my friends and family, cooking and everything like that in our backyard. So in the time span from 07 to 2015, 2016, this was primarily, like a twice a year, 3 times a year event we'd do in our backyard. We'd invite over 50 to 100 people, and we'd just have, in Marin County, California, we'd have a wild game feed. There'd be abalone, striped bass, smoked salmon, halibut, venison, elk, you name it. And that would just be how we would feed all our friends when we come together.
So it's still just a family thing up until 16 or so.
So in 2016, the hunting brand apparel company Kuyu gave me my first kind of like ability to do this publicly outside of our backyard. And I showed up. They used to do an event called the garage sale, and I showed up and I pulled out my grill, started slicing bread, and pulled out a leg. And everybody that's there is, you're looking at some of the best hunters that are alive right now that are showing up to their events. You know, anyway, so I start cooking this leg, and they're all kind of laughing at me like, this guy from California doesn't know what he's doing. There's no way he's going to make this taste good. This mule deer, like.
Who heard about you that brought you out there?
I had been, so at that point I was teaching hunters education, and I would go to Kuyu and I would teach private classes to their staff.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I taught Jason Harrison and his kid and his wife and everybody like that. So Jason and Brendan had me come and cook a leg, Brendan Burns, and they all loved it. They were like, oh my God, this is the most amazing way we've ever had wild game. I didn't know that you could make mule deer taste actually like really, really good. And And from that, it just kind of rolled forward. There's another company called Deadeye Outfitters, and they're like the best way you could sum them up would be like DC DC apparel would be like Deadeye Outfitters, but for the hunting space, hats, hoodies, not camo, just everyday wear. And these guys had me come cook at a little thing they were doing in a backyard, and they look at me and they look at this 15-pound leg, and they're like, there's no way that this guy is going to be able to cook this. It's 8 o'clock at night. This isn't going to work. We're not going to be eating meat until 3 or 4 a.m. And 45 seconds later, the meat's on the grill. They're eating steaks. Completely blew their mind, and it just kind of morphed into its own thing. Maybe a year after that, I was in a hunting camp in California, and celebrity TV chef Jet Tilla was there. And Jet had, again, similar circumstance, Jet and all these top level Iron Chef competitor, award winning chefs from around the United States are in this hunt camp. And these guys are looking at this leg, and they're sitting there with their plate of sides, and they're looking at this leg, and they're like, why does this guy know who we are? Like, what does he think he's doing? We're not going to be eating meat for hours. And
so they think that because it's sitting there prepped and it's not on the grill or anything yet, and they think it's going to take forever to cook. They don't realize you're flash searing it. And
yes, exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I start doing that, and then they all sat me down at the end of it and critiqued me, and they're like, dude, this is some of the most amazing meat we've ever had and one of the best food experiences.
That's pretty crazy to have like people like that be telling you that, right?
Yeah.
So then it just kind of takes off from there, and people start hearing about it and calling. Because I think you just told me before we ever went on that you kind of go all over the country now and cook for large organizations for their events and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I cooked for Yeti for a lot of ambassador parties they were doing during their film tour, and some of the stuff they were doing for Total Archery Challenge. And they gave me a huge opportunity doing that. Worked with Sig Sauer, Field Ethos. Field Ethos had me come out to an event they were doing, and this is before the magazine had even launched and when they were still a very tiny brand in their infancy. And went out to Don Jr.'s house in upstate and had a great time for 5 days. I think we went through 4 legs, and the time span that we were there eating, goat legs and deer legs, blacktail, mule deer, whitetail, all different kinds of stuff. And again, same circumstance, blew everybody away. Did not know that that wild game could be cooked that way, and B, that it could actually taste as amazing as it did.
Now, I'm assuming that a decent amount of this also has to do with, I don't know if you want to call it a marinade or whatever that is. I know that you've got this proprietary blend that then you said you mix it with red wine as well.
Oh yeah.
Is that something that your grandfather developed, your dad developed? Where did that get?
Actually, toss that completely to my grandmother. My grandmother is the one who perfected the sauce.
Okay.
And then that recipe card was handed down from my grandparents to my dad to me. And in 2016, 2017, I would sit in my garage with a 5-gallon bucket, and I would mix sauce and ladle it into quart jars. And I had an honor system out of my back gate. And people would come up and they would pick up a bottle of sauce and put a $20 bill in the envelope. And that was kind of how I started selling sauce and doing that. Because for me, a lot of it is about yes, it's an amazing cooking method, but it's not just about me showing up and cooking for people. It's about people taking this tradition that was held in our family for 75 years and experiencing it in their own backyard with their own family and friends, and them getting to be the person who's cooking and preparing this amazing wild game for all of their family and friends. And that up to Bert. Like Bert cooks a few legs every year. He does it with his neighbors. He does it with his family and his friends. Um, and there's, I was, this week's sheep week, right? We have sheep show coming up in Reno. And I was talking to a friend of mine that a relationship I've developed over the last few years, 8 years going to sheep show. And she was sharing with me, she's like, I'm so grateful for you and our friendship. My son killed his first deer this year, and the first thing we did was take the leg off, and we did a flip flop. And it's all because you shared your family's tradition and you shared your family's experience. And they ran a very successful outfitter in Northwest Territories, and they were doing legs once a week for the last 2 or 3 years while they ran that outfit, with clients that would fly in. Before they'd fly out, they'd cook a leg of caribou or a leg of sheep or something like that. And that for me is what it's all about. It's very much all about people getting together with their families and friends with the absence of me, and getting to share this cooking technique of wild game with everybody they love.
Yeah, you already get me excited. I'm ready to go out and buy my Coleman. Get some. So for people who live in warmer climates, aka the Carolinas, that kind of stuff, where I live, if you don't have, excuse me, if you don't have a cooler, a walk-in cooler, what's your recommendation on,
Get an oven tray.
Okay.
And put the leg on an oven tray with like one of those turkey racks or chicken racks or something like that, and just stick that in your fridge. And if you can, put a little fan in there just to keep the air circulating, and do that for 4 or 5 days. And if you can't do it, that's fine too. It doesn't always have to be aged. That's just my preference.
Gotcha. Okay. That's good. So if people are, now I haven't done this before, so it's going to be, I'm just kind of circling back to what you said before. You want those briquettes up to how close to the grate? You said a half inch?
Half inch.
And how long? I know you said you're not measuring temperature, but are you basically just looking for everything to be red hot?
Yeah. And I'm not waiting for the flames to die down.
Okay.
Right.
So if there's flame over the grate, you're good. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. If there's flame over the grate and the whole top layer of charcoal is red, and there's no black left, like, that's your go time.
Okay. So the top layer has to be red. It's not like ever. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. And so how would you recommend for somebody doing this the first time, right? And say, okay, if you've never done this before, you're going to go give it a run. What's the best process for somebody to do it somewhat successfully? Because that's going to be me. I'm asking for myself.
No,
I'm sure I'm asking for other people too.
So you're going to need a 14-inch brisket slicer knife. And
okay.
The reason for that is that you're going to be using the last 5 inches of that blade while your hand is off the side of the grill, because you don't want your hands over 1100 degree heat while you're doing it. You're going to hang the bone end of that leg off of the grill so your handle stays cool and you can still flip the meat. I don't use gloves, and I don't singe hair off my hand when I do it. Now, mind you, I've also been doing it for a lot of years. But so you want that 14-inch brisket slicer. You want the mop, because that's going to help you keep your hand off the grill.
And you're just using the bone end of that leg as your handle, essentially.
Yeah, that's your handle, so you can flip it.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I mean, really, and it's funny. So I was cooking an event with Sig Sauer, and Bert and Bo Sandoval were both helping me on it. We had 3 legs going. We had 3 grills going. And it's funny because Bert's cooking next to me, and he's like, I've done this enough times that I know how to do it, but cooking next to you is the most insane thing I've ever done, because I'm watching you and how fast you're working and what you're doing and how calculated you are on every slice and every cut and every flip and the whole thing. Like, he's like, he's like, I didn't realize that it was as quick as you were doing it. Um, and it's that's the learning curve, right? It's the best part is that when you're doing it for your first time, you probably have 30 opportunities to do it right, because every time you're flipping it, you're starting over.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. And I know depending on the size of the leg, it's going to be, but back and forth, you're like 15 times on each side, give or take, is kind of normal for a
Mm-hmm.
normal, whitetail or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of meat.
It's a lot of meat,
Yeah, that's
a lot
interesting.
of mouths to feed.
I think I may have to be your lackey at Winter Strong.
Yeah, please.
just come over and like be your lackey and learn.
And I mean, I think the most legs we've ever done at Winter Strong was 12 or 13 legs at one time.
That's a lot. Holy cow.
But you've been out to the farm, I'm assuming, and
Yeah.
you've seen the
Mm-hmm.
grill that's out there, and we just load that thing up, and there's enough room for everybody, and everybody's taking turns. Everybody's doing their own legs, and I'm doing a leg, and everybody's feeding everybody. And it's a whole communal experience, and everyone's actually getting hands-on time to learn how to do it.
That's super cool. So obviously there's a big tradition of hunting in your family.
Yes.
Right. You live in Montana. What do you hunt everything, or do you have something that you specifically like hunting better than others personally?
Well, so for affordability, I love hunting mule deer because I can hunt them all over the United States, and I can usually start hunting in July and not stop hunting until, January if I really wanted to push it. And that's hopping from state to state to state to state. Um,
Taste wise though, does whitetail taste better than mule? I've never even eaten mule deer, but I'm from what I've heard, I've heard mule deer's hard to make taste great.
I'll put this out there that whether I'm cooking Rocky Mountain sheep, desert bighorn sheep, Dall sheep, stone sheep, caribou, mule deer, whitetail, blacktail, elk, cow elk, bull elk, there is no variation between the flavor of meat between species when you're cooking it this way.
That's pretty insane. I've never heard that before, like of any other way of cooking anything.
It's one of the wildest things I've ever experienced, having had the opportunity to have cooked as many different species of ungulates that I've cooked. It's probably one of the craziest things that I've experienced in it is how the flavor between all of it doesn't really change much.
Does it ever get to the point where you feel like you want something different, or is there a way that you can change up the flavor a little bit with the marinade, or is it just so good that you doesn't matter? You're just going to keep eating it all the time.
Yeah, it's so good that it doesn't matter. And on top of that, when you're 6 flips in, the entire profile of the meat changes because you're getting
Okay, that's
deeper.
interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
You're getting deeper into the muscle. You're getting deeper into the meat, and you're getting beyond those top layers. So the deeper into the leg you get, the better the meat becomes.
Okay, so the enemies get the top layers.
Yeah,
the friends get the bottom layer.
100%.
So you hunt a lot of mule deer. Do you have to travel to hunt whitetail there, or do you have whitetail?
No,
there?
we have whitetail here. I mean, this year, me and my cousins, we killed 6 elk. We killed 3 or 4 10-point whitetails, an 8-point whitetail, and another 3 or 4 4x4 mule deer.
Are you rifle hunting mostly, or do you bow hunt also?
So in the last decade, I spent a lot more time behind a bow than I did a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say majority of that was hunting California.
Okay.
With a bow. And
that's a lot of harvesting with a bow.
Well, so in California, you can take 2 animals a season.
Well, just the fact that you've got that many opportunities, like, is just obviously you're in a good place, but you know what you're doing. So as a new hunter, like, I literally worked the whole season to get one shot.
Well, so in California, so the way that my hunting season, I kind of took this year for myself and back off.
Okay.
I did a lot of spiritual work and a lot of like mental housekeeping and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of dialed it back this season, but my average season would be like 2 deer in California, a deer in Utah, and a deer in Montana, and an elk in Montana, and that would be an accumulation of rifle hunting and archery hunting.
Are you mostly hunting Northern California? Is
Uh,
that where most of that,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
yeah?
D3 through 5 for
Okay.
anybody that's familiar with California that wants to go hunt.
Yeah, I've never been out there before to California, so I'm kind of, this was my first. Obviously, like I said, I just kind of started hunting,
Yeah.
but I went out to Colorado this year. That was my first whack at an elk hunt, but I've never done a mule deer hunt before. But Bert gave me this. Were you hunting with him when he did that stalk on that mule deer last year?
I was not. No, no.
Okay.
But I remember that very well.
Yeah, I guess this was like try number 4 for him on mule deer. And he had told me that he was like, if I didn't do it this time, he's like, I was ready to give up on mule deer. And then he had this epic like 2-hour stalk on this thing. The
Yeah.
stories are pretty crazy.
Well, it's funny too. I've offered Bert to come out and hunt with me year in and year out, just because, and not to boast, not to boast fully, but like, in California where I hunted and I was able to successfully take 2 deer a year, public land success rate, because I predominantly have only hunted public land my whole life. Public land success rate was 3% in the state. And I was 100% for a decade straight on both my deer tags in a 3% success rate area. So I can pretty much kind of almost,
Sounds like you know what you're
I
doing.
know what I'm doing. And, my success rate in Montana on deer my whole life of hunting deer is 100%. I don't think I've ever had a deer tag that I didn't fill. I've had plenty of elk tags that I don't fill, but my threshold for taking a bull elk, it's got to be like, 310, 320 bull or better. And
Mm-hmm.
where I hunt, finding a bull like that is very difficult. And I'm too stubborn to go explore other places in the state. But every year I usually end up killing a cow just because I'm not going to shoot, a young bull that hasn't matured yet. I would rather see that bull. There was one bull that I was pretty familiar with for 3 or 4 years that I was waiting to mature to get to that point, and then someone found him with a rifle and shot him, which is like, that's great for that hunter and that's their prerogative. But I'm not going to look at a raghorn bull on my wall for the rest of my life and be like, man, that was a great bull. That was a great hunt. I'd rather just shoot a cow and have the meat.
Yeah. I've kind of had the same thing, and I've gotten probably directive the other way. I let a lot of younger deer pass this year.
Mm-hmm.
6 points, those kinds of things that were, probably 2.5-year-olds but they just weren't very big. They weren't very, mature. And I've had a lot of people that are experienced hunters just say, like, you just got to shoot them. You got to kill to get better at killing. And
Well,
I think for everybody what's that?
That's what does are for, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. Now, I literally had more young bucks walk in front of me than does the entire year. And part of that's just, South Carolina is kind of a weird place. I had a lot more luck traveling with shot opportunities, but I think that's just, I've kind of been the same way. Like I shot a nice 140 8-point last year in Southern Illinois.
That's a great deer.
Oh yeah. He's amazing deer. And then this year, like I said, I let some younger ones walk, and I was up in Ohio last weekend for really my last kind of shot at it. And I had a 7-point walk in. It was probably like a 115, but he was a nice looking deer. And he was a little bit, I put it right underneath him. He jumped the string and I put it over his back.
Yeah.
So, but that was the one I had worked all season to get that one shot opportunity. But that's kind of, if you're going to bow hunt, that's kind of part of it. I just have a lot to learn in terms of scouting and understanding travel patterns and all the kind of things to put yourself in a position to get regular shots that like people like you are kind of second nature to you.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I spent my last 8 years in California. I spent teaching hunters education, and I was also managing 750 acres outside of Cloverdale for pigs. And I would cherry pick from my classes, father son combos of new hunters where the dad was a new hunter and the son was a new hunter, and they were looking for
mm,
something fun to get into. And
yeah.
I'd take them out and I'd show them what pig rubs look like and pig tracks and deer tracks, and kind of get to do the full experience with them. And, rarely would we get the opportunity to take an animal. But one of the most important things for us as hunters is being able to pass on our infinite knowledge of time spent in the field to new hunters, and really getting to be a part of that mentorship for new hunters. And that for me was, a really, really great thing. And I still to this day will try to take new guys out and people who haven't had success with something. Cause like 95% of the time, if someone's going to hunt with me, they're probably going to have success.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty amazing opportunity for anybody that gets to do it,
Yeah.
because most of us that are starting, are we may be talking to people, but no one's taking us out and saying, "Hey, coaching us through it."
Yeah.
Right? As a guy who spent my entire life coaching, every athlete that I coached, I was right there next to them, coaching them through every little thing they did.
Yeah.
This is a unique situation. If you didn't grow up with a father or
A
someone,
mentor, just a
a
mentor.
mentor to
Yeah.
teach you, and you're really just trying to learn this from podcasting and talking to other people, but then you're going out in the woods, the woodsmanship part of it is, in my opinion, I'm a really good shot, but the woodsmanship part is the part that takes me forever to learn,
Hmm.
because there's just so much there that you have to be able to, gather all this knowledge, assimilate it, and then apply it to, well, what does that mean in terms of giving myself an opportunity, for a shot of mature animal? Like, that's the part to me that's the most difficult part.
Yeah. 100%.
It's not the shooting. Yeah.
100%.
So, well, listen, I know you're getting ready for sheep. I usually run these things a little bit longer, but you're getting ready for sheep show. I'm going to meet Bert for lunch.
Nice.
And I want to be, respectful of your time. And I'm going to see you in a few weeks at Winter Strong
Yeah.
too.
I'll
So
see you at Bird.
that's going to be awesome. How do people find you, and then also how do they reach out and contact you if somebody wants to contract you for an event or anything like that?
So my website, if someone has any inquiries about having me come out and cook, they can contact me through my website, which is www.theflipflopguide.com. And then if anybody, social media is just at the Flip Flop Guy. And if anyone has questions, they can message me there. They can message me through the website. I'll get back to them. Whatever I can do to help, I try to help every single person that messages me, whether that's get on the phone and walk them through how to cook a leg or whatever it is that I can do to enhance and improve their experience on their end. That's my goal.
And they can buy the marinade product off your website
Yeah, the
as well.
marinade, the mop, I've got seasonings on there as well. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff.
And I think you've got a link tree on your Instagram,
I
right? That's
do.
got a link to all that stuff.
Yeah.
If I checked it earlier.
Yeah, I do.
So that's a great resource. If you just go to Andy's Instagram and click on the link tree, it kind of has a drop down for everything.
Yeah.
And then you've also got a podcast, right? Is it all focused around cooking, or what's your podcast primarily focused around? I listened to the first episode, it was around coffee.
Yeah.
Or like the last episode was around coffee, but I haven't listened to it, the entire time.
So, I haven't, I'm actually this year going to try to refocus on getting back into doing podcast episodes. I've taken a break from podcasting probably for 3 years. I did originally with that podcast, when I went through it and deleted out episodes, I think I was somewhere around 300 or 400 episodes.
Oh, wow. You had a lot in there then.
Yeah. So, and when we started podcasting, we were probably one of the first hunting podcasts outside of like Jay Scott Outdoors,
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Snyder's podcast, and a couple others. There weren't many. And then the podcast market became so flooded, that I just refocused and did other things, and have been focused on other things for the last few years, and life experiences, and, not trying to put out 52 podcast episodes a year. 'Cause that is a full-time job in itself. And managing sponsors and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, I do one every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
sometimes one every 3 if I'm hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it for a selfish reason because I get to learn from people like you, and I get to talk to people. Like, for me, it was literally just about how do I get access to talk to people and learn from people. And, and if you just reach out to somebody and be like, hey, can you jump on the phone with me for an hour?
Yeah.
Most people will be like, who are you? But if you have a podcast and ask somebody to jump on the phone with you for an hour, they're
a
say
lot
yes.
more likely to do it.
Yeah, they're a lot because they get some exposure, and it's amazing how, even though not knowing anybody, how many people end up listening to this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, I get messages from people all the time that are like, hey, that was a really interesting piece of information. Even though they're a ton more experienced than I am, they glean something from the person I talk to. So it ends up being productive. But I appreciate your time today, brother. Thanks for jumping on. Man. And I can't wait to see you at Winter Strong.
Yeah, 100%.
It's going to be awesome. Thanks.
You
appreciate it, Andy.
You bet.
This section of the podcast is brought to you by Osseo Gear. With its one-of-a-kind Raptor camo pattern, Osseo blends seamlessly into the whitetail woods. Osseo's features and technology are designed to fit the unique needs of the bow hunter. With a lifetime warranty, Osseo is designed by bow hunters for bow hunters. Use the code DONOTGO20 to get 20% off any order from the Osseo Gear website. Visit them at osseogear.com. Elevate your game with Osseo.